And welcome back to A Coach's Handbook with Coach Dan. I'm your host, Coach Matt. We're back 2 weeks later. It's been an interesting ride. A lot of things. I can tell you one thing is, Dan, planning this podcast now, we've got a few episodes planned. I'm super excited about it, even more so than I was the last time, especially being a parent of a kid that has big aspirations. Super excited about learning from you and seeing a lot of different views, and I know a lot of parents out there will probably look at the same way. So not only are coaches going to be excited to hear from you, but I think parents are too.
Sure.
So with all that said, a lot of things have happened over the last couple weeks. So let's dive into a little bit into your club soccer, as tryouts were a couple weeks ago. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so June 7th was our big day. Typically all the clubs in the area across the state try out at the same time. So, parents are signing their children up. We had a great turnout. We formed a couple of new teams. We did lose a couple of older teams. But there was a lot of excitement. Players have to pre-register for that process to try out. And then they arrive. We take care of our youngest players first, our U8 Academy players. They come in. It's more of a try-in for them because we don't typically like to cut players, especially at a younger age. So those players will come, they'll kick around for 20, 30 minutes. And then once we've kind of verified their level, their excitement for the game, we will send them to the checkout tent, and there they will register for the upcoming year, for the fall and the spring. And then the package also includes a summer camp and a winter training program. So it's about an 8-month program. And then, of course, later in the morning, we welcome our U9, U10, all the way up through U19, boys and girls. And so, just very excited about the season ahead. Like I said, we made some additions to a couple of our stronger teams. So that kind of bodes well for the season ahead. We did lose a couple of older teams, and a couple of teams split because of the high school age difference, with some kids going into 8th grade and then some going into 9th grade. So we had to kind of backfill. So it's always tricky when you're bringing in new players to the club. I think we referenced this before in our last podcast. Players that come to us brand new sometimes arrive to us having missed a large portion of the developmental curriculum. And so we just at that point want to provide a place for children to play, a place where children can be happy, they can get a good workout, they can make friends. And then on the flip side, we talked about our higher level teams. Our goal is to add better players to our rosters each year so that our teams can climb. I think we've done a good job of that over the past few years. And so our goal now is to get out of the Michigan State leagues, and get into that sort of regional national league level. So that's very much the goal. I think a couple of our teams are on the cusp of that this year. And so we're very excited. Like I said, there's something for everybody here. There is a high level of play, but there's also a play available maybe slightly higher than recreational, where kids can come in, they can develop and take care of other goals that they may have.
I know that the parents get really stressed out at that time as well. You want your kids to have a home, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I know as being a coach for you and seeing this over the last few years, and now from I was on the sidelines this time, seeing all of these parents, what's going to happen? I don't see enough players on the field. I know that at the end of the day on Saturday, you had several teams that weren't finished.
Right.
Tell me how the next week progresses with that.
Yep. So, like I said, once we've got a core base of players for each team, we send them to the checkout tent. In a couple of cases, I think we had 7 or 8 players on a couple of our 11v11 teams, and so our maximum roster is 18. And so that following week, we're fielding calls from other clubs and other parents who have had their child cut or dismissed from competing clubs. We also then do makeup tryouts. We did it actually Monday through Thursday this year for an hour each evening. I think the Monday we had about 30 children show up.
Oh, wow.
And then Tuesday it kind of was down to 10, 15. And it just kind of fizzled out towards the end of the week. But that enabled us to backfill those teams that needed players. Like I said, we were fielding calls and emails throughout the whole of last week just to finalize rosters and to form teams. Like I said, with that perhaps comes a lower level of player, but we welcome it because we know what we're capable of as a club and as a coaching staff to provide that environment for every player to grow in our DBSS family.
So the moral of the story to the parents when they're worried on that Saturday is patience.
Patience, yeah. Patience. There are a lot of children out there that want to play soccer, and I said I have full faith in our coaching staff to develop any player and any team. And so I think competition's good as well. If you're coming in, you know, perhaps not knowing everybody on your team, there's an incentive for you to do well and to try to prove yourself, to prove that you're worthy of playing on that team, to work hard and to gain that respect amongst your peers as well.
Excellent. So part of this, we obviously want to know about your club. It's a big part of your heart. I know that for sure. But we really want to get into the college level and stuff like that. But before we can even get to that, we need to go back to the beginning, and we need to understand you as a person and as a coach. Since we just went through tryouts and we just were talking about club soccer, what was it like when you were that age? And you grew up, you didn't grow up in the U.S. Obviously, you can tell by your accent, you're a little bit different. It's not Southern. So kind of go into that and how you felt as a kid going into tryouts and what your parents went through, your dad especially went through with you and soccer.
Yeah, so growing up as a kid, you know, we're immersed in the game. It's football, soccer is our number one sport, and so you can't help but get involved. I remember as a kid on my bike, on my BMX, driving around my subdivision, seeing a bunch of kids playing at the local field and the local soccer club, and so I just happened to take a ride and I started joining in. It was like more of a pickup environment. I feel like I fit right in at that point, and so I was invited to come back and practice. And back home, we don't like to drive a lot, and so with it being such a smaller scale country in terms of size, I was able to walk, like I said, ride my bike there, and so we tend to play with the kids in our area that are in our own town. We very rarely, you know, disperse to other clubs like you do here, and so it became very community oriented. We actually didn't really have tryouts. We didn't have tryouts at all for that youth soccer club. We would just, at the end of each season, we would all go our separate ways in the summer with the knowledge that we would see our teammates again that following season. And so there was no stress of trying out. You know, obviously, if you were good enough, you would still remain part of the team. And each year, you know, having played together for a few years, we would get better and better and better. And so at that point, if you were kind of climbing towards the top of your local youth division, you would get scouted essentially by places such as Centre of Excellences.
What age is that?
That would be sort of U10 and up, I would say. Okay. U10, U11 and up. And so the elite players would get together and practice on a different night. It was extracurricular, perhaps somewhat like ODP is over here. Okay. So you're playing with a bunch of other players of your level, but you're still kind of playing for your club. At the age of 11, 12, some of my friends were getting scouted by professional clubs. In extreme cases, an 11, 12-year-old will get a 10-year contract.
Wow.
At a professional club. They might even relocate that child's family. So, you know, that's the exceptional kids. And so I would say I was more of a late developer. I got better with age. The more I practiced, the harder I worked, the more hours I put in on my own, in addition to the organized activities I had available on my team. And so I had to be very patient. I felt like I had a lot to prove. The knockbacks came, and so I had to have that attitude of, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove you wrong. And it kind of fueled my whole mentality. And I think I kind of bring that into the working world with everything that I do. I like to think I'm a hard worker. And when I get knockbacks, I like to, you know, put my head down and kind of plow through it and try and create solutions. And it's no different to our club growing or the Cleary University program not having a win or a team when I arrived. And so just those constant challenges, they don't faze me, they excite me. And this has all come about through my experiences in the game. At age 16, I finally got the breakthrough I was looking for. I was playing at the Centre of Excellence, and one of the coaches recommended Stuart Housley, who became my youth coach at a professional club called Yeovil Town. Stu was a former professional at Grimsby Town and Yeovil Town. He's no longer with us. We lost him a few years ago, and I actually lived with Stu and two of my teammates. His family took us in. We moved 2 hours from home, and we kind of lived and breathed soccer. So we were very fortunate. You know, we would have our transportation and accommodation provided for. And I was off and running. That was my first professional club experience. And so things kind of escalated from there. Played for my local county, or my state, if you like. And we had a very, very successful season. Whilst I was at Yeovil, whilst I was doing my college work, we actually won the national championship up at Goodison Park, which is where Everton played. They've recently got a new stadium. I scored a couple of goals in the final, and I think that's when a couple of other professional clubs came knocking to try and get my signature. How
old were you at that point?
I was 17.
Okay.
17, 18 years old. So I signed semi-professional or trainee professional terms with Plymouth Argyle, which is my family club. You know, my dad, my granddad, my great-granddad supported them. Kind of like being a Lions fan, I guess.
Right.
And so I was fortunate enough to have my education on the soccer field with Plymouth for 2 years. Nearly broke into the first team after scoring goals and playing really well for the youth team and then the reserve team. And the reserve team is a kind of a mixture of trainee professionals my age and then full professionals that perhaps aren't getting the minutes in the full pro team, so they need to come back down and get sharp and get match fitness, maybe recover from injury. So it's just a phenomenal experience. We'd train with the professionals. You know, if we were doing well on the youth team, we'd get kicked. You know, we'd get called out, get cussed at, but you'd learn pretty quickly to be humble and to keep your head down and just to keep that level of hard work up.
Excellent. So you kind of went into what the structure sort of looks like in the UK. Like there's not a bunch of clubs that are in the same area. It's
Right.
kind of all your home area.
Yeah.
So what is, with so many leagues in the US, things aren't as complicated in the UK. Where do you think, what do you think the big differences are?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think the biggest thing is pay to play. Back home, I think we pay £1 for the referees, £1 a player per game to to be able to play. There was no club fee. The uniform the club owned, so the coaches would take the uniform home and wash it, bring it back to us, so you got to keep your own number year on year. And so just very, very different. Over here I feel like the whole pay to play thing, it could almost be excluding to people that quite simply can't afford to pay for the club fees. And so whether that be inner city kids or people with multiple children, they just simply can't afford to, or logistically can't get them to the sessions or the games. And so it's interesting. I feel like there's a lot of children that miss out, a lot of talented children. And so I think if you're able to play club soccer, it's a privilege for sure. But then we have all these leagues and different associations, which in my opinion, it kind of confuses things. For me, I would much prefer that one steady pathway that you organically grow and graduate up through. Now we're seeing a lot of different levels and leagues, rec through select, through Premier, which is the state level, DA, GA, NAL, NLC, all of these levels can be pretty comparable. I think the big reason why our club, DBSS, didn't go to DA at the age of U11 or U12 was because I felt that we could provide the coaching and the development to the point where we could beat some of these DA teams, and we end up beating a lot of these DA teams. And
there's an extra cost involved.
There's an extra cost and there's more travel. And so that's not to say that there aren't some very, very good clubs out there that have those levels. But in some cases, you're lifting up the one team that is of that level, and you have to have a certain amount of teams that also join. So those teams that aren't ready to play that level are almost forced to go. They end up losing. In some cases, they end up getting thumped every game. And, you resort to then having to play risk-free soccer, which means your goalie's going to get the ball and going to kick it as far up the field as you can, perhaps to the quickest forward player, just to avoid any mistakes. And so that for me is not true soccer. That is not true development. I love to pitch our teams at the right level so that us as coaches can teach, how to play out the back, if it makes sense, to teach positions, to teach, what I believe to be true soccer, to be played on the ground with attacking intent, lots of movement, and everybody involved. So, like I said, there are some very, very good clubs out there that warrant these high levels of play. But for us, it's more of a, can we put our teams at the right level so that they can grow and feel comfortable, yet challenged in the right area.
So you mentioned not understanding a clear pathway, and I know as a parent, now I'm lucky, I'm friends with a few college coaches, you being the big one, but how, what is the path, or is there a true path? Everybody says this league is the one, this league is the one, but when you as a coach and as a recruiter, for Cleary, how do you find your players?
Right. For us, primarily, we go to local showcases, we go to tournaments, we watch youth games. For myself, I would say almost certainly watch more youth soccer games than we do high school. Again, there are some very good high school programs out there, and as the programs progress into the next levels and the next rounds, you do see a very good level of play. But I think, I take the same mentality into Cleary. I don't discriminate based off of level. If somebody wants to come to our program, they can still improve. They might not see the varsity field in 4 years, but with the addition of a JV team, we can still provide an environment where a young adult can grow, can get a degree, they can play JV, which is a reserve team sort of league, and they can they can have that college soccer experience. And so I think, our club has shown, certainly with Coach Dustin's team recently, we've sent players to college at various levels. We talked about Cleary already having a couple of former DBSS players, and so I think it's not far-fetched if you're a U13, U14, U15 boy or girl in the club. If you want to play college soccer, you can almost certainly go and do it if you're willing to put the work in. Like I said, we have players, our top teams are at the Premier level, and so there'll be times where we come up against higher level teams and we compete in tournaments or State Cup or even the USL Summer League, which we're about to enter. And so there are many, many different ways to be seen. We've talked about ODP, that kind of center of excellence style training and game model that they have. So I think the biggest thing is just persistence. It's putting the hours in, it's putting yourself out there, it's being persistent and just staying on the ball.
Again, I live two lives. I live the life of a coach, and I live a life as a parent of a player that does want to play in college. Yeah. I think you have opened up my eyes with how I should think about that with my daughter going into high school. By all means, she's got a path. I really liked the head coach of Butler talking to us at the U.S. Technical Championship about there is no clear path. We right. find our players.
Yes.
You need to be comfortable with your team.
Yeah.
But I think you changed my wife and I end goal by the way you phrased it. And I'm leading you into what you told me. I don't remember how much you told me, but you said it's not about Annie playing D1 or D2.
Yeah.
It's about, is she going to finish school debt-free?
Right.
Go into that.
Yeah, it's a big thing. I've now coached at the D1, D3, JUCO, junior college 2-year, and now the NAIA, which is a 4-year. I think they say it's the equivalent of Division 2 NCAA. But each job I've had, I would obviously represent that school to try and recruit players to either meet my quota or simply have a team that can compete. And so the biggest thing for me at Jackson College was I could get players in fairly cheap because of the tuition. Perhaps they didn't have to live in the dorms. They could spend 2 years getting an associate's degree. They could remain open-ended with their degree, general studies, if you like. And then at the end of those 2 years, come out, like you said, in yourself, nearly debt-free, especially if you're working alongside that. And so junior college is good in the sense that players can perhaps, as freshmen, come in and play soccer right away, versus going into a 4-year school that might not have a JV program and have to sit the bench for the first 1-2 years of their collegiate career. And so fast forward to Cleary, we were fortunate enough to be able to add a JV program, and so it goes back to my mentality that yes, we want to target the top players so that the varsity program continues its growth, but we can also bring in those developmental players to give them an experience, to give them the time they need in their first couple of years to grow as people and players, so that then they break into that varsity team in their junior year, perhaps.
And then in the end, like, again, with the end goal, how many kids, well, let's say this, how many kids, first of all, play in college that are playing club soccer, and then going from college, how many go pro? Like I said, we talked about, yes, my daughter wants to play college and wants to go pro, but what are the odds? So where should the focus be?
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I believe 1% of youth soccer players will go to Division 1, which is a very small number. And of course, outside of that, the percentage then has to be lower to then go on to become a professional. This season we're going to have approximately 45 players at Cleary. Last year we had 35. And I would say, I think there was one player that if he had pursued it, he could have had a very good chance of going professional. And so, you know, what does that look like for this upcoming year? You know, maybe there's another one or two that could come over and do well and put themselves in the shop window. But again, it's a very, very small number, minute.
So your focus should be college.
College, life, you know, we're very structured at Cleary. I think anybody that's seen me coached, even the youth, we have very, very high standards. We hold our players to those high standards. It's not always praise. We've got to let them know where they're failing, and I love to do that in the moment. I'm not a big fan of waiting until the halftime to address problems. I'm a big trying to establish the problems in the moment to give instant feedback to players. Providing lessons. We like to provide lessons, not just on the field. We want to obviously prepare our student athletes for life post-college, and so it's important that they get the structure. You know, showing up on time is 10 minutes early. Showing up in the exact same game attire or practice attire, so you're looking like everybody else. We're looking like a team. And I think that counts for a lot. I think you look at some of these other sports, I like to reference the March Madness, and you get some of these schools that are perhaps not very well known, and all of their players are wearing the same shoe. And it's noticeable. And then they end up going and knocking off one of these higher ranked teams. And so all of those little things intrigue me. It's the 1%. We try and focus heavily on the 1%. You know, what is our nutrition like? What is our hydration like? Are we giving ourselves that positive self-talk when things are going not how we want them to? So yeah, it's important we give our student athletes more than just the game of soccer.
Well, I think you instilled that into me when I was a younger coach. Granted, I had coaching experience before that, but not with curriculum and structure, if you will. And one of the things that I would instill on my younger kids, when you show up to a game, your bags are in a line.
Yes, yeah.
You know, you're not sitting around talking, you're getting right into your passing while you're waiting for me as a coach, or waiting for whoever your coach is.
Yeah.
And that's at age 7, 8 years old.
Right.
To where this season, I think that did have a difference because we were ready for that game.
Yes.
The mentality was there, and it showed. We had an undefeated season.
Right.
We went that direction. I think starting that early, getting them that mentality, I can tell you that with Annie's team, you can tell the days that we're going to struggle because we're not locked in. We're not going right away. You know, there's a handful of girls that are locked in, but not the whole team.
Right.
And there is a difference when you get that mentality.
Yes. Yeah.
So, so going back to comparing the UK and US with youth soccer, what do you think are the main differences when you see youth soccer in the UK today versus the US soccer? And I'm not talking about the different levels of play. I'm talking about the development in general.
Yeah, I would say, again, it helps that it's our number one sport. I think over here you've got the football, the baseball, the basketball, multiple other sports, and I think there is a tendency to see more of a multi-sport athlete. Whereas myself, I was purely soccer driven from an early age. You know, we were told to take a 6-week break at the end of the season where we didn't touch a soccer ball. So we were told to go swim, go play cricket, go play tennis, just go and be a kid, go and swim. And I think that helps refresh the mind. It allows you to miss the game. You know, the other side of it is we don't have to drive everywhere. We can walk to our local park. Parks are more accessible, perhaps. You can walk to a park and see 20 strangers of different ages just playing pickup soccer. You know, the whole backpacks for goals. No referees in sight, no coaches in sight dictating what the kids are doing. It's just, boys and girls playing of all ages, just having fun. There's no yelling if you make a mistake. You're watching other kids, you're seeing what they do, and you're trying to maybe copy them. And so, it's brutal. You'll get kicked, you'll get pushed around by the older kids, but it toughens you up, and it definitely is an education. And so I think we talked before about the importance of setting that up in our club. Yes, we have the structure. Yes, we have the team practices with coaches, but we recently added the Monday nights, and 1 hour of that is structure. But then we completely leave the kids alone for a whole hour to scrimmage, to goof around if they want, make their own decisions, fail, succeed, learn from each other. And that's been huge for us. I think the spring season compared to the fall has shown immense growth, especially with the addition of winter training for everybody. Every one of our members participates in winter training now. Yes, it comes at more expense, but for me it's that investment, it's those hours that these kids are putting in, which is now coming to fruition. You're starting to see, teams rise with top coaches, and teams being together more often, playing with their friends more often.
I see that as a big difference too when I look at other clubs, and we have a new player joining Annie's team, and I know the mom, and the biggest thing is the worry is, well, it's not my team, but that's the one thing that I've loved about Annie's team is how much they love each other.
Yes.
And how much they're accepting, and they don't just hang out at soccer.
Yeah.
And the first thing that the captains did was, let's get her on the text chain, let's get her on, so that she can be part of that.
Yeah.
And I see that the teams that do things like that, not just our club, and every club, really are the teams that succeed.
Right.
Because they are a family. They aren't just, one and done, and
right.
So I think that that's a huge deal.
Yes. Yeah. I think you've got to buy into it. Once you join us, like you hit the nail on the head, the teams that can get together more are the ones that are going to be successful. And I think our team managers play a big part in that. They're very, very organized. Each team will have a representative, a parent that will kind of be the voice of the team, the communicator of the team. And they will, in some cases, get these team parties together, these social events. They'll keep the parent group organized. They'll keep us coaches organized when we're coaching multiple teams.
Love our managers.
Yeah, they do Absolutely. A lot of hard work, and we're very, very thankful for them. And it makes a real team effort, because at the end of the day, we're all, parents, coaches, we're all there to help the child succeed. And so, the more they can be together, the more they can hang out, the more relationships are formed, and the more success that team will see.
Well, I know I've been talking with a couple of your players from Cleary, and the excitement that I know the one has shown me about how much of a family your Cleary team has become. I'm really I'm excited to see that in the fall. Hopefully we're going to dive deeper into that.
Yeah.
Maybe have to bring some of your players on, because you may not know what's going on sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
I know that coming up, we're hoping to have another episode of this talking about the actual recruitment and diving into the recruitment process. So look forward to that. I know from a parent, I'm excited to get into that one. We're going to hear from some other people from Cleary that help you with that process.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, I think each week or every other week until the season starts, I think we can get some good information and hopefully enjoy it while we go.
For sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
All right. And we'll see you guys next time.
This the best time. Why you wanna be an outcast? Numbers don't lie, you gain a lot from this math class. It takes time to be great, you can learn the lesson. Blood, sweat, and tears, heartbeat of a champion. Big or small, your heart is the biggest weapon. So follow before you lead and water and plant your seeds. When it's all said and done, you be the best they ever seen. So listen to my catalog on this coach's blog.